Hey everybody, tonight's video is called Captured and Destroyed, and tonight we continue our pass-through study here in the book of Nahum, where we're going to be looking at Nineveh captured, Nineveh plundered, and Nineveh broken. And so you're going to hear many times in this book of Nineveh's fall in 612 BC at the hands of King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon. Though still future in Nahum's day is described vividly in present terms. And so we are in chapter 2 of tonight's study, and verse 1 says, "He who scatters has come up before your face. Man the fort, watch the road, and strengthen your flanks, fortify your power mightily." So Assyria had made a practice of dispersing captives to many nations, and now she would see similar judgment. And the prophet, with irony and satire, ordered the Assyrians to prepare for the coming invasion from Babylon. And in August of 612 BC, the combined forces of the Medes and the Babylonians destroyed Nineveh, and shortly afterward, the Assyrian Empire collapsed. So we are still in the month of August ourselves, and we see that the time frame of this took place in August of that year. And verse 2 says, "For the Lord will restore the excellence of Jacob like the excellence of Israel, for the emptiers have emptied them out and ruined their vine branches." So this wasn't just a reference to the southern and northern tribes, since the northern tribes had been overrun by Assyria almost a century earlier. But these are the titles of honor for Judah. Remember in the day when Jacob received God's blessing at Peniel in Genesis 32, verse 27-28, and he had his name changed to Israel. And together, Jacob and Israel signify the nation's restoration to the promised position. And Assyria had repeatedly emptied the land, destroying its fruitful vineyards and economic bloodline. In verse 3 says, "The shields of the mighty men are made red. The valiant men are in scarlet. The chariots come with flaming torches in the day of his preparation, and the spears are brandished." So shields were either overlaid with copper, whose reflections of sunshine would make the army appear larger and strike terror in the enemy, or they were covered with hide that was dyed red, so to extinguish fiery arrows and to minimize the sight of blood. And scarlet clothing would have similar benefits. And warriors, denoting their eagerness and readiness for battle, would wave their weapons. And the army of Assyria herself earlier were God's instruments to accomplish his purposes of judgment, seen by the prophet Isaiah in Isaiah chapter 10, verse 5-7. And the Babylonian army favored red colors, as seen in Ezekiel's prophecy, Ezekiel 23, verse 14. And verse 4 says, the chariots rage in the streets. They jostle one another in the broad roads. They seem like torches. They run like lightning. So confusion reigned in Nineveh, where battle preparations were hurriedly made. And this verse isn't prophecy of vehicle or traffic congestion. Some people take this random verse out of the chapter here and be like, look, this is talking about modern day with, Route 2 traffic or wherever you live that might have a lot of congestion. Verse 5 says, "He remembers his nobles. They stumble in their walk, and they make haste to their walls, and their defense is prepared." So this may continue the thought of verse 4, depicting Nineveh's royalty and military leaders dash into one of her defense towers, which, according to Greek historian Diodorus, Jiculus numbered 1,500 and reached a height of 200 feet. And it's also possible that the latter part of the verse is a description of the attackers preparing to erect a mantelet, a small fortress-type box in which the soldiers rode for protection as they advanced to the wall. In verse 6 says, "The gates of the river are open, and the palace is dissolved." So Nineveh lied on the confluence of 3 rivers. It lied on the Tigris and 2 smaller rivers. And there were dams constructed to minimize the damage of seasonal flooding to her walls. And the latter part here of verse 6 suggests that these dam gates were opened, causing the walls to be dissolved and the palace to be taken. Verse 7, "It is decreed, she shall be led away captive, she shall bring up, and her maidservants shall lead her, as with the voice of the doves, beating their breasts." So the goddess of Nineveh, probably Ishtar, was taken by her attackers to demonstrate the superiority of their gods, as seen in 1 Samuel chapter 4. There's some words in English that I do not like. But the temple prostitutes mourned the fate of their goddess. And Nineveh, we see, is personified as a woman, a queen going in exile. And Nineveh would fall before the mighty army and be humbled and led away captive, like the Assyrians led other nations into captivity. And in verse 8, though Nineveh of old was like the pool of water, now they flee away. Halt, halt, they cry, but no one turns back. So Nineveh was like a spring in the desert that attracted many people, and they fled from the devastation. In verse 9, take spoil of silver, take spoil of gold, there is no end of treasure or wealth of every desirable prize. So spoils abounded in Nineveh, but it was her turn to be plundered. In verse 10, she is empty, desolate, and waste. The heart melts and the knees shake. Much pain is in every side, and all their faces are drained of color. So the great city of Nineveh, lying in ruin, evoked fear and terror in those who observed it, as seen from Daniel chapter 5, verse 6. And the chapter ends with verse 13. We're going to read verse 11 through 13 to finish this section here. It says, where is the dwelling of the lions and the feeding place of the young lions? Where the lion walked, the lioness and the lion's cub, and no one made them afraid. The lion tore in pieces enough for his cubs, killed for his lionesses, filled his caves with prey, and his dens with flesh. Behold, I am against you, says the Lord of hosts. I will burn your chariots in smoke, and the sword shall devour your young lions. I will cut off your prey from the earth, and the voice of your messengers shall be heard no more. So some pretty tough words to take in here at the end of the chapter. And archaeologists have found a carving from a palace showing an Assyrian king on a lion hunt. And the prophet Nahum rhetorically asked where Nineveh has gone, no longer describing Nineveh's fall. He taunted her, ridiculing her fall from power and glory. And like a pride of lions with plenty to eat and in fear of no enemy, Nineveh ruthlessly tore in pieces her prey. And she herself will become the prey for another nation under the sovereign direction of the Lord. And I am against you should be the most feared words that any nation or person should hear coming from God. And we don't think of "I am against you" coming from God's mouth today. In the New Testament, we're going to see in our wrap-up that God is for us. And so, under judgment, really, God is against you. And so Nineveh was known for burning the captured cities and would receive the same fate. And the voice of the messengers who carried the edicts of the mighty king of Syria to the captured nations would become mute. And don't miss that God is the author of Nineveh's humiliation and disappearance. Sometimes we don't really want to think about, what might seem in the negative sense doesn't come from God. But it was God, because God is the one that sets up nations and he removes them, as he said through his prophet Daniel. And it wasn't just that God was against them. That was bad enough. The Lord of hosts was against them. The commander-in-chief and over all the armies of heaven was against them. So for a quick wrap-up here, to keep this short tonight, we look at the battle call of Nineveh. And in verse 3 through 7 showed the battle was decided. Verse 8 through 12 showed Nineveh was brought low and spoiled. And then we see that the chapter ended with the Lord vowing to conquer Nineveh. And we spoke of the scary words just a few seconds ago of, "Behold, I am against you." And for me, I don't know about you, but I am very thankful for the Apostle Paul's words given in the book of Romans. Let's go take a look at just a small part of the section. And if you need an encouragement today, I challenge you to read Romans 8, verse 31 through 39. But for time's sake, today we're just going to read Romans 8:31. And it says here, "What then shall we say to these things? If God is for us, who can be against us?" Now, yes, God is for us when you are in him. For non-believers, though, it's, if God is against you, then who can be for you? I want to leave that with a thought today. So we'll see you next, as we'll be wrapping up this book, and I'll let you know when that video will be posted. God bless.